You know, our environment, it's a phrase we hear all the time, but what does it really mean? How does something like a single ray of sunlight connect to the food that ends up on our plate? Well, over the next few minutes, we're going to connect those dots. We're going to see how everything from the tiniest microbe to the biggest whale is all part of one amazing interconnected system. So, let's dive in.
It all starts right here, with the sun. It is the ultimate power source for our entire planet, and it fuels this unbelievably complex web of life. When you look at it on this grand scale, it's honestly kind of mind-boggling. So where do you even start to understand something so massive?
Well, to really get a handle on how this massive system works, what if we just zoomed way in? What if we started with something a whole lot smaller? Imagine a complete, self-contained little world, maybe one that could fit right on your desk. That little world has a name. It's called an ecosystem. You can really think of it as the world in a box. And a perfect example, one you've definitely seen before, is just an aquarium. It's a miniature man-made ecosystem where we can literally watch the basic rules of nature play out right in front of our eyes. Okay, so what is an ecosystem officially? It's all the interacting parts in one specific area. And that includes the living parts, what scientists call the biotic components. That's your plants, your animals, all the little microbes. And it also includes the non-living, or abiotic parts, things like sunlight, water, the soil, the temperature. It's all of it working together.
Now, inside that ecosystem, every single living thing has a job to do. And all those jobs, they really revolve around one crucial thing, the flow of energy. So let's meet the main players in this little energy game.
First up, you have the producers. You might also hear them called autotrophs. These guys, like green plants, they basically perform magic. Through a process called photosynthesis, they grab energy from the sun and turn it into food. They are, and this is no exaggeration, the foundation of pretty much everything.
Next, we've got the consumers, or heterotrophs. These are all the organisms that can't make their own food, so they get their energy by eating other things. Think about it, a rabbit munching on some clover, a hawk swooping down to grab that rabbit. They're all consumers, just passing that original solar energy up the food chain.
And finally, you have what might be the most important group, the real unsung heroes of the whole operation, the decomposers. When plants and animals die, these microorganisms, we're talking bacteria and fungi, get to work. They are nature's ultimate recycling crew, breaking down all that dead stuff and returning the nutrients to the soil so the producers can use them all over again.
So how does that energy actually move between all these players? Well, it's not a free-for-all. It actually follows some pretty clear rules. We can visualize these rules as food chains and, on a bigger scale, as food webs.
So here's a super simple food chain, a classic example. You have a plant, the producer. A deer, the primary consumer, comes along and eats it. Then a tiger, the secondary consumer, eats the deer. See, it's a straight line. The energy moves from one level, or trophic level, to the next. But, and this is a huge but,
that whole process is honestly incredibly inefficient. Because as energy moves up each of those steps, a ton of it gets lost. On average, only about 10% of the energy from one level actually gets stored in the body of the next. Just 10%. That's it.
Now that is a huge amount of energy, just gone. It makes you wonder, right? If that tiger only gets about 10% of the energy from the deer it ate, where in the world did the other 90% go? Well, it doesn't just vanish into thin air. A lot of it is just lost as body heat, and the rest is just the cost of living, you know? It's burned for moving around, for digesting food, for growing, for everything that animal does just to stay alive. So the big takeaway is that most of the energy an animal eats is just used up by being alive. And of course, nature is way messier than a simple straight line, right? A rabbit could be eaten by a fox, or maybe an owl. A fox eats rabbit, sure, but it also eats berries and bugs. In the real world, it's not a chain. It's more like a tangled, messy, and much more resilient food web. Okay, so now that we've got the basic rules of how these systems work, let's talk about what happens when a new player enters the game and starts, well, changing those rules. And that new player, of course, is us. Our activities can have really powerful and often totally unintended consequences for these systems. Okay, so think about something like a pesticide that gets into the water. Tiny little plants absorb a tiny bit of it. Then a small fish comes along and eats thousands of those plants, and that pesticide starts to build up in its body. Then a bigger fish eats hundreds of those smaller fish.
So by the time it gets all the way to the top of the food chain, the concentration of that chemical has been magnified thousands of times. It's a process called biological magnification, and it means the animals at the top, which often includes us, can get the most dangerous dose.
And look, our impact isn't just local. In a lake or a forest, our activities can actually change the very air we breathe, the atmosphere that protects the entire planet.
A really powerful and actually kind of hopeful example of this is the story of the ozone layer. Back in the 80s, scientists figured out that chemicals, called CFCs, they were in everything from spray cans to fridges, were literally eating a hole in the ozone layer that protects us from the sun's radiation. It was a massive global crisis. But here's the cool part. The world actually listened. In 1987, countries came together and agreed to stop using these chemicals. And it's just this incredible proof that when the world decides to act together, we can actually fix these huge environmental problems.
So all of this big global stuff, it brings us right back home, right down to something we all deal with every single day, our garbage, because everything we throw away, well, it doesn't really go away. It has to go somewhere, and that's a huge challenge.
Basically, the stuff we throw out falls into two big categories. You've got biodegradable waste, things like food scraps, paper, cotton, that nature's decomposers can break down. But then there's non-biodegradable waste, like plastic bottles or metal cans. Nature can't break those down. They just stick around for a long, long time. We're talking hundreds, even thousands of years.
And you know, this quote about disposable cups really hits it home. It shows how something that seems like a great idea can have these massive side effects that nobody saw coming. When they first brought disposable cups onto trains, everyone thought it was a huge step forward for hygiene. But nobody was really thinking about the impact of throwing away millions of these cups every single day.
But wait, the story gets even more complicated. The solution to those plastic cups was to use clay cups. But making all those clay cups meant using up tons of valuable topsoil from farmland. So then the solution to that was paper cups, but that has its own problems. It's just this perfect reminder that when it comes to the environment, there's almost never a simple, perfect solution. Every single choice has an impact.
So that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Everything is connected. From the sun's energy hitting a plant, to the energy it took to make whatever cup is in your hand right now, it's all one huge interconnected system. And that leaves us with one final thought. A question for you. Knowing how it all connects, what's just one small change you could make that might send a positive ripple through that whole system?